And yeah.
Brilliant.
And it was literally on page 2 of your book, wasn't it? Let's get this straight.
Yeah, I had to do it straight away, so I couldn't really help it.
You also talk, right at the beginning of your story, about a black pole in the backyard, which you would kick against and try and hit playing for football. And that was the beginning of your journey. I love that imagery. Take us back there.
Yeah, it was pretty much like my first memory of playing football has been in that small yard in the back of the house. And I don't know, it was just like, I'm competitive. So it was always about, right, OK, like what can I try and do to test myself? And I think my dad just said, just try and hit that pole as much as you can from every different angle. And it just became a thing then. So I think it was only right that the first chapter was the pole, to be honest.
It's already a technique I've borrowed with my son, who says, come outside and play with me, mummy. And I'm like, no, there's a pole there. Off you pop. It's quite useful.
Yeah, it keeps him out. My mum did it all the time, to be honest. Go on, just go and play out there for 8 hours while she's doing all the housework and stuff. So it worked anyway.
But it's obvious from the book that, you know, football was just, it was like in your DNA. I mean, it was just, this was something you were destined to do.
I think so. You know, when you look back, and it was really like cathartic, like going through the book and actually doing it, because I think ever since I could run and walk, it was always going to be football. I come from obviously the northeast, if you can tell by my accent.
Really?
But it's a bit of a football mad region. It was either Newcastle, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, and for me it was Sunderland. So everything was just revolved around football every weekend, every school break time. So it was only kind of like the thing that I absolutely loved, and everybody talked about it as well. So you kind of just involved with football from the beginning, really.
But it's one thing as a little girl in that era, loving it and living it, but to project yourself into making a career out of it must have been unimaginable.
You know, it was really unimaginable, I think, for me. I think just to play, just because I absolutely loved it. I knew that it was always going to be part of nations. I wanted to kind of just, like, show the kind of, like, transition from amateur to professionals happened so quick, but I've seen both sides. So I hope that does come across in the book in terms of, like, the differences from the beginning to now.
But it's interesting you say they've got the kit, they've got the facilities, but they've also got you, haven't they? Because it's the inspiring figures, the role models that, you know, you're such a part of. That,
yeah.
You're a massive part of that.
I think for me, like, I think when I was growing up, I used to look up to Kevin Phillips because I was a Sunderland fan. David Beckham, he was obviously captain of England. Steven Gerrard, they were the players that I looked up to because I could see them every single day on the TV if they were playing football, or they were always spoken about, whereas now everybody can look up to the likes of Chloe Kelly, Lauren Hemp, the Lionesses now. They're just so in the front of everybody's mind.
What made you do that? Because it didn't come naturally to you, did it?
No, it never really did. I was quite shy and I didn't really like confrontation, didn't really kind of want to argue the point in terms of... I think having that conversation with my agent, which was literally just around the corner here the first time I met him, and we have this conversation about, like, OK, like, where do you want to be in the next few years? And you just sit down, have them, like, really tough conversations. He was just like, this has to change. And I think it took someone from the outside looking in to be like, OK, we can make a difference in this area. And I think it's not just me, but there's a lot of girls in terms of the players that have played before that have had to have these tough conversations to where the game has gone. And it's took a lot of hard work. It's took a lot of no's as well to be...
Did it feel like a risk to rock the boat over pay?
Yeah, it did, because obviously at the time I was playing for Arsenal, the best football club in the league, and I went there to play football to win trophies, but ultimately I was an individual and I wanted a future. I wanted to kind of save towards a house just to try and kind of, like, start, like, what I was going to do after football.
And you were actually earning, just tell people at that point...
Probably £4,000.
£4,000 a year?
Yeah. So the way that they worked, it used to be per game, but obviously if you actually sat down and worked it out, which I never really did, I was just like, oh, my God, I'm going to play for Arsenal, I'm going to be representing England, and to be able to do that over 12 to 13 games in a season was amazing. So I think just to actually have that round figure was like, OK, that kind of, like, triggered something. And from then we started to have conversations with clubs and also with the FA as well.
Brilliant.
You talk in the book as well about the end of your career and that it didn't necessarily finish the way you wanted to internationally, and that relationship with Serena Wiegman and the difficulties there. What's the state of play there? I mean, have you seen one another? Do you speak?
Yeah, actually we did the other week when I'd had my Wembley send-off. I finally got my 100th cap. I got to lead the girls out again, and I think for me that just put closure on the whole situation. I think obviously, of course, you want your career to end in a certain way from an international point of view. It would have been great to be part of that Euros, but for me, I know I did absolutely everything. It wasn't ideal, but if I look back at my book in terms of the story that I've been on. It's never been straightforward, and it's always been a little bit bumps in the road. And would I ever change that? Probably no, because